So in my tier list ranking of Resident Evil games, I had this in S tier, the top. And I had just went through the entire game again, and finished it today. And I have further thoughts on it. Now it's still at the top. Okay, it's still going to be one of the best Resident Evil games that they've ever come out with. But playing through it this time around, kind of gauging it a little more harshly than I guess I really ever have thought about it. I'm going to do this review. So, this game, the first of its kind, goes first person. You don't have a third person in here. You don't have a DLC where you can be in third person. This is strictly first person, which I believe it was a gamble for Capcom after Resident Evil 6 to do that. Okay. In the main story series. And I think it was a really good decision because 5 and 6 started to get stagnant. Okay. 4 really started the third person view. 5 and 6 continued that. But especially part 6, I think tried to do more ambitious things and tried to do little things and split it into chapters, and it didn't really work, in my opinion. That's why it was ranked far lower in my tier ranking list. And by the way, you can go check that out in my channel there in my tier list rankings video series. So here we have Ethan, who doesn't really get a whole lot of backstory here, except that he's going to Louisiana to track down his presumably wife, I would guess. I don't think they were boyfriend, girlfriend. I think they were a wife there. I really didn't. Still playing through there a couple times in this game is still kind of fuzzy with that. I'm pretty sure they're husband and wife. Anyway, Ethan's going to this area where he believes that his wife is still alive, and after a 3-year absence, after receiving a video message that something was wrong. So, what ends up happening is in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre like setting, that's the best way I could describe it. He goes into this area and he ends up fighting for his life. Now, the first 75% of this game is really, I mean, it has the shooting and action, but I think the overall mm, feel is still one of the scariest Resident Evil games to date. Now, thinking back to like the very first Resident Evil game on the PlayStation 1, and everybody was like, oh, when whoever you're playing, Chris or Jill, turns the corner in that one hallway, and you see the very first zombie scene of it killing one of your members and rising up to get you. I mean, that's going to stick in everyone's mind from Resident Evil fans alike that's played it since the beginning of its run. So this kind of like brings that creep factor back, because I think that the one thing that Resident Evil kind of went on and got a little bit away from as the series went on was the horror factor, the creep factor. And I think Biohazard here and even the new one, Requiem, brings back that horror, the where you're not really meant to be seen or you need to run away, that kind of thing. I'm trying not to spoil too much here. It's gonna be really tough. I might have to do spoilers for this because of trying to get my points across. Okay, warning now that there will be uh, spoilers. I'm gonna try and be as vague as I can. Um, so essentially, Ethan comes face to face with this family in this house, and they're nuts, to put it lightly. I believe the husband's name is Jack, and oh, I had their names today, and now I totally blank on the other two. Essentially, what you find out is there's this kind of entity virus, I'm going to call it, that has been causing the problems, and it started from what I grasp on this ship, which is like the climactical part of this game when you get to that point. And you have sprinkled throughout the game are flashback videos that you actually play as character here and there and what happened during the sequence of that videotape that's being watched. And those sequences, for the most part, are kind of eh, um, especially one self sequence that you have to hide and you can't be seen actually. And I mean, it's creepy and horrific in the sense of trying to hide. It's kind of like where in Resident Evil 2 remake, where you're Sherry, you play a little kid, and you're trying not to be seen by the chief of police. That whole sequence there in the orphanage. And the reason I say it's kind of meh is because I don't know. I guess the pacing kind of slows down a little bit there. Um, right in the beginning, Ethan's getting his ass handed to him. Like he's no fighter. You get that, and he's got to hide, and he has a relentless Jack chasing him. Like you can't kill it. You can stop him if you can, but ultimately you need to get away from him. And it's kind of like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 remake, where he's following you once he's alert or active, and if you make noise, he'll find you. If you don't sneak, he'll find you. Here, it's more like he comes at you like really fast, and you can't take many hits if at all. You do fight him 3 times, and each time you fight him, he's obviously a lot more bigger, bulkier, buffer, I would say, and ugly too. Um, so, like I said, the first kind of like 75% of the game is like while there's shooting bits, there's puzzles involved that are actually pretty cool. Um, but that's when Resident Evil is always brought in like their higher ranking games is the mixture of the action and the horror and the puzzles, and here is no different. So you kind of like start off in a big house, and then you kind of go to this other location, uh, and it's like another house, I suppose. And then there's kind of like underground areas and stuff like that. Um, so For that bit, you collect ammo, and depending on what difficulty you're playing on, really will depend on how survivable you will get. Um, the boss fights are tough. Uh, I think I would say that there this game would rank high on boss fights being tough to do. Uh, I mean, especially with Jack, your those boss fights are really tight fighting areas for you to try and survive, and you have to aim. Well, you can't miss. You cannot miss like very much. Uh, Hits you can only take 1 to 3 again, depending on your difficulty level, what you have it at. From certain attacks, some are instant kill hits, like the one boss sequence with Jack as he runs you over with a car. You know, yeah. Um, so after kind of like dealing with that, you have a sequence there where you're dealing with the one son, um, and he's more of the trap setup type of character. Um, and that sequence there is getting through this area of bombs and as one particular, like it feels like Saw almost, a game that you have to kind of figure out. Now, my run through with this one, it glitched a couple of times and pissed me off because of how, and I'm not going to spoil this section there for you, but particulars of the way the sequence played out glitched on me. So I died a few times to it when normally I would get through it. And that was frustrating. The sequences themselves are really interesting. Um, the mother, I suppose, like you have kind of a boss fight with her, but not really. Uh, but she uses bugs, and they can get very aggravating. You can die to them really quick if you're not careful. Um, but she doesn't really chase you like Jack does in the early goings of the game. So that's kind of gives you a little bit of reprieve to kind of solve things and get through the area that well. Um, what else? The phone calls that Ethan gets throughout his playthrough are leading him to, you know, an eventual decision that he makes and you make as a player that, is interesting. I don't think ultimately it just changes the game 100%. It's just interesting that it's there. Um, Now, here's some of the disappointments of this game. Um, the last 25% of the game in the ship is fucking boring because you're playing most of it, you're playing as Mia, the wife, which is fine. Um, and You play through a flashback video part as well, so you kind of have the before and after of the ship and kind of what went on. But I didn't, I didn't particularly really engage too much into that because it was pretty much like most of the time you have to backtrack a lot and you got to shoot, and I don't know. It just takes you out of what was set up in the early part of the game with the house and all that kind of stuff. It reminded me a little bit of Revelations. I think it was the first game where I believe that was on a ship as well, and I didn't really care for that. So maybe that game kind of tainted the last bit of this game for me a little bit. Um, the enemy types, other than uh, the family itself, are these molded that are like these kind of black, inky type of creatures. They have like the strong ones that you gotta really take a lot of. They could take a lot of punishment to go down. You have the crawler ones, which are kind of like a variant of a licker, I suppose. And then you have like your standard ones that come right out of the wall or the floor. Um, they get boring. They're, there's no real variation in their combat. And then when the big brute molded show up, it's like it's just a sub boss fight essentially. Um, what else? The last boss fight sucks. It's the reveal of the last boss fight is absolutely like one of the worst in the series, in my opinion. Um, and it's not really built up that well either. Um, because the story as it goes along is simple enough and it's interesting enough, even in the ship parts where things are revealed, start to get interesting in the aspect of the story, not so much the gameplay and the ship. But getting to the final boss is such a letdown. Um, and playing through it this time really made me not like it. It's not like the epic bosses from other Resident Evil games. Like even I'll throw in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis remake, even with the last fight of the boss fight. At least there's some interesting aspects you gotta do to fight the Nemesis and kill him eventually. But here in Biohazard, it sucks. It's uninspiring. Yeah. But overall, I think Biohazard is still a key high ranking Resident Evil game. Horror's there, the combat, you pick it up. It's first person view is different, but you get used to it. Um, you can't go in Call of Duty, you will get killed. Uh, you have to conserve your ammo as best you can in the early parts of the game, especially for playing on higher difficulties, because you will get smoked. You'll not have any ammo to fight anything, and your knife won't help you here, if at all. And overall, I think it's a very solid Resident Evil game, solid package. It just playing through from a critical perspective does have some faults. I mean, every game kind of does. Like, even my favorite game of all time, Resident Evil 2, the remake in particular, I don't like the fact that Mr. X is in the first scenario, the first time you play through with whoever you play as. And I think they should have done that like the original Resident Evil 2, where he shows up in the second run of the game. I get it, where you get the real true ending if you go through a second time. Mm, parts of Jack stalking you in this game kind of reminded me of a Mr. X, but a more honestly scarier. um, type of villain because he comes right at you and you can hear him. And yeah, I think he's actually for a type of invincible character chasing you throughout for a while. Creepy. So, um, but that's my review of Resident Evil Biohazard and finishing it today. Kind of like a more updated 2026 review, I suppose. Hope you enjoy it. Um, and eventually I'm going to go through, well, I'm finishing up Resident Evil 4. I want to go to the village and do that one because my Resident Evil series list grows. And at some point, Requiem, the newest game. And we'll see if that changes my ranking. But even with the flaws in this game, I would not change the ranking of Resident Evil Biohazard, and I would keep it an S rank the top, as I put it in my video for my tier ranking list. So anyway, that's Resident Evil Biohazard.